Hey there, welcome in everyone. Back after an extended gap in time between shows. This is your host, that's kinda between the coast, coming to you live from the Mile Highland City. This is Andrew Rochford on Twitch, YouTube, and the Twitters on a cool Wednesday night here. Hey, Mariella. Nice early arrival. As reason why I didn't do another show in between last Monday was the fact that I was sick since Friday and I wasn't feeling it for doing a live stream until tonight, but finally back. Hey, Ellie. So, a couple big important things to talk about, like the way progressives have no spine when it comes to opposing war, for one, and how that is leading them to look very indistinguishable from neocons. And the other part of it is we'll go through some highlights of last night's Dr. Oz and John Fetterman debate, but present it in a different framing than what most of other media would do that as. But first off, before getting started here, if you're on the YouTube side of things, please click the like button. Subscribe if you're not a subscriber yet. Share it somewhere new, somewhere familiar, and somewhere in between. And also, if you're on Twitch, please be sure to click the follow button and help me reach the next goal on Twitch would be 50. Then I'll try to focus more on getting the average of 3 viewers to reach affiliate status. I know that there's even a lot of other big channels that struggle with Twitch. Hey, WCSN. It'd be nice to have some rain here, even though it's pretty cool. Right here in Denver. But even like RBN, the Convo Couch, they struggle to gain followers on Twitch. So you could be big, small, and in between, and everyone could have issues struggling to gain followers on Twitch. Also, go down below to the link tree in the description, and please, if you're not on Rumble yet, you should be, because many of your favorite independent left channels are on Rumble too. So, and my Rumble is synced up correctly, so now my videos are starting to go there without no real effort on my part. So let's, with that being said, now it's a good time to officially start the show. And we'll start with we'll skip the actual letter itself, which I'll explain a bit about it after we go through the withdrawal. So in this letter from Pramila Jayapal, the Congressional Progressive Caucus hereby withdraws its recent letter to the White House regarding Ukraine. So what happened on Monday is a letter went out from the Congressional Caucus talking about a small, tiny push for diplomacy in this moment, as this thing has now been going on for 8+ months. Happy hump day to you as well, Mrs. Kelly. Let's go over the meat of this letter. Representative Pramila Jayapal, chair of the Congressional Progressive Caucus, issued the following statement on a letter sent regarding Ukraine. The Congressional Progressive Caucus hereby withdraws its recent letter to the White House regarding Ukraine. The letter was drafted several months ago, but unfortunately was released by staff without vetting. As chair of the caucus, I accept responsibility for this. Because of the timing, our message is being conflated by some as being equivalent to the recent statement by Republican leader McCarthy threatening to an end to aid to Ukraine if Republicans take over. The proximity of these statements created the unfortunate appearance that Democrats, who have strongly and unanimously supported and voted for every package of military, strategic, and economic assistance to the Ukrainian people, are somehow aligned with Republicans who seek to pull the plug on American support for President Zelensky and the Ukrainian forces. Nothing could be further from the truth. Every war ends with diplomacy, and this one will too after a Ukrainian victory. The letter sent yesterday, although restarting that basic principle has been conflated with GOP opposition to support for the Ukrainians' just defense of their national sovereignty. As such, it is a distraction at this time, and we withdraw the letter. So, this is a moment of me going into Pramila Jayapal logic. The moment that you call for diplomacy means the end of that movement. You know, she broke out that same logic when she was asked last year of why she wouldn't force the vote on Medicare for all, as it is, and all the progressives in Congress said they couldn't. Well, Cori Bush was one example of someone who said she couldn't do it since it was Jayapal's bill. That would be the same exact type of logic applied in this statement, which has a lot of problems to it. Like, for example, the letter was drafted several months ago, there, which we found later was July. So the question is, why would you sit on that shit way back in July when whether you released it shortly after then or now, the situation is just as applicable. And what we found is that WCSN says, wait, so Republicans for or against the perpetual and continued army of Nazis going back 10 years by now? Well. You know that there's some Republicans who are going to be disingenuously against funding the proxy war because they want to shift into a different proxy war with China, for one. But then there's also the angle of keeping gullible people in the two-party duopoly by continuing to vote for politicians. So as long as, because there is a faction of the MAGA right, for example, who still believes that Trump will eventually live up to the so-called anti-war rhetoric that he had from back in the 2016 campaign. That's the thing that we know that they're trying to keep people in by doing that. And if they don't do that, that's just going to be more anti-war people finally coming to the realization that there's no voting against war within this duopoly, because anyone who claims to be against it is going to be forced into it once they take the halls of Congress, or once they start. Let's see, what's another key part here? So they are so pro-war, the Democratic Party as a whole, that they're afraid to be equivalated to Republican minority House Leader Kevin McCarthy. And that also applies to the being having that same equivalency to like Mitch McConnell. So the flex is, as long as you're like a liberal warmonger, it's much more comfortable to be just like a Mike Pompeo or Antony Blinken, just because of how afraid they are of having some point of agreement, whether it's in bad faith with a Marjorie Taylor Greene. That's exactly where we've gotten to. Yeah, just about every elected progressive uh, breaks out this bullshit smoke and mirror of uh, being afraid to be associated with that. Then, in this moment, the Democrats coming off as more neocon than Republicans, slightly more, is supposed to be more virtuous. Here's another extremely contradictory statement and illogical. The very last paragraph. Every war ends with diplomacy, except for the fact that continuing to hand the funneling of money to the military industrial complex, the defense contractors, that's doing the exact opposite of pushing for diplomacy. And there is no winning for the Ukrainian people. There's countries significantly larger than Ukraine that would not be able to win a war with Russia. And you think, and there's still all these corporate media lies of how Ukraine is winning the war. And we know that's not true. Not whatsoever. And what the thing that should be conflated with the thing that needs to be conflated more is the fact that this narrative management that they think is somehow a flex in a good way is actually one that could potentially lead towards nuclear war. And people are very understanding of that being a very, very dangerous, uh, treacherous path to go down. And what's the distraction is not the fact that there are people bringing up legitimate concerns of that. The distraction is trying to tell you the complete opposite of what's really happening. This is not winnable for Ukraine. And much of what you think liberals is going to help the Ukrainian people is not really helping them. In fact, you're actually more anti-Ukraine by continuing to advocate for them to be used as cannon fodder. Let's see, I know that there was another video I wanted to include before going. Yeah, we got to go to a case study quarterbacks profile for some couple videos that are connected to this before we shift gears to the Bernie Sanders article. So it's going to take me a moment to scroll down for that. But let's show this from WCSN. You see, Lisa, it all starts with a newly cure and ends up at your house's electricity. Homer Simpson explaining nuclear power to his daughter. And what's sad about that example you just pointed out right there is that you can have real Homer Simpson on a YouTube channel give you a better knowledge of nuclear weapons than you would get from corporate media. But it's going to be a Morning Joe clip of this whole little meltdown that I think it's, yes, I got it up now. So let's go to that next. So once again, shout out to Case Study Quarterback for all the work he does putting these clips up on his Twitter, as they provide a lot of content for many people in this media space. I don't use his videos a lot, but I will be going through a couple of these on tonight's stream.
More than 24 Democratic lawmakers are urging President Biden to dramatically shift his strategy on the war in Ukraine. In a letter sent yesterday, 30 Democrats led by Progressive Caucus Chair Pramila Jayapal are calling on the president to pursue direct diplomacy with Russia. They argue a more forceful attempt at diplomacy is necessary to bring the months-long conflict to an end. The letter was criticized by some centrist Democrats for potentially legitimizing Vladimir Putin's crimes in Ukraine. Then, hours after the letter was released, the caucus sent a rare follow-up statement to clarify its original message, writing in part, "We are united as our Democrats in our unequivocal commitment to supporting Ukraine in their fight for their democracy and freedom in the face of the illegal and outrageous Russian invasion," and nothing in the letter advocates for a change in that support.
Wow. Mike,
come on.
Mike. Did they walk into Kevin McCarthy's office and say, "Hey, we want to help you out here. We know that you stuck your foot in your mouth about Ukraine, so we're going to help you out here"? You just think about this.
Look at that. Brainworms logic that you're not supposed to do anything that's right because, oh, someone on our team agrees with it.
Vladimir Putin invades Ukraine. Vladimir Putin commits war crimes against the Ukrainian people.
Don't forget 8 previous years of Ukraine committing war crimes against its own people, specifically in the regions of the Donbass and the Luhansk.
Vladimir Putin selectively targets apartment buildings to kill children. Vladimir Putin bombs playgrounds. Vladimir Putin orders his troops when they leave towns to deliberately target and kill all Ukrainian civilians. And you have 30 progressives saying America must talk to Russia. Something's left out of that equation.
You know, the fact that war is not one-sided, like the way that so much of corporate media frames it to be. Yet they present people who, like myself, who challenge the narrative of what's going on right now. And we get labeled Putin puppets, when most of us just want the United States to not be involved in this shit, for one. Why would an aggressor choose to kill kids over the military, Joe? Yeah, that's exactly what's happening there. Not even talking at all about all the crimes that Ukraine did over its own people following that Maidan coup.
And that would be the Ukrainian people who are victims of war crimes every day, Mike. What planet do these people live on to think that you can make peace with Vladimir Putin without first running it by Ukrainians, the Ukrainian people and their...
You know, you can't treat the Ukrainian people like they're some monolith, you know, Joe, because why would, like, that recent referendum where people in the Donbass and Luhansk regions all voted to secede from Ukraine? It's because they're tired of being attacked by this military and coup government. They want to be safe from that. But there's also a lot of innocent Ukrainians there who don't want this to go on any longer. I know that there's an anti-war contingent there too. But let's be real. Ukraine is not the saint that corporate media like Joe Scarborough wants to make it out to us to be.
Their leader, Zelensky, who is literally fighting for his life, and the Ukrainians are literally fighting for their lives. Well, what you said...
I would say that there's a few very important people in relations that I'm sure Zelensky's going to be safe. You know, Malcolm Nance, who pretends to fight in the Ukrainian military, we know he's safe. The most important celebritized figures and all this, they're going to be safe. It's the people that are in danger.
Joe, just now, resulted in the second letter. It's like the Cuban Missile Crisis. We're going to respond to the second letter that they posted rather than the initial letter, because in the initial letter, everything that you just said would pertain to a critique of that letter. Why would you negotiate with Vladimir Putin? He is a war criminal. He has used the same strategy that the Russians used in World War II. destroy and demonize your opponent. Try to make your opponent so fearful by killing innocent civilians, by bombing schools, hospitals, sanctuaries, cathedrals. Kill the civilians. That's how you win the war. That's how the Russians think that they can defeat the Ukrainians. They can't defeat the Ukrainians that way. And the United States has no one to negotiate with in Moscow because the leader of Russia is a war criminal.
Yet, even after saying all that, Russia has been more willing to go into diplomacy than Ukraine. But then you see they flip the script, their talking point against that. Well, oh, Putin's too brutal, so it's off the table now. When the reality is, it's been Ukraine and their president Zelensky who has refused diplomacy. Fucking crazy. Zelensky just requested another $34 billion. Meanwhile, I had to pay $8 for lettuce. You know, with the what are we up to now? Like confirmed money-wise, like 80 billion by now. Think about how much of that could be used to offset the cost of lettuce. Maybe that billions of dollars would be the thing that, hey, we'll pay like $4 or $5 on that lettuce for you. That way, Kelly here will only have to pay $3 for it. But no, they want to keep feeding their sugar daddy Ukraine, and Kelly's eventually going to have to pay $10 for a head of lettuce in January. You know, it's the same type of thing that they try to accuse Venezuela of having the empty grocery stores. And if you want to see what that's like, a few years ago, Max Blumenthal, he went into a Venezuelan grocery store to show you what it's really like there. Shit's actually pretty full. And the fact that, and the things that are ridiculously expensive were done by capitalists. Yet, grocery stores here have areas which struggle to stay full. And you know who's responsible for bumping those prices up? You guessed it, the capitalist. WCSN, funding arming Nazis. American student loan debt / Medicare for All. Dem / RNC 2022 and 2024. And there's a video we'll get to in a bit that shows that example out in real time. That right there is very true, Kelly, that it doesn't feed their machine, but that doesn't mean you capitulate to this machine in the way that our spineless cucks of elected progressives have.
Yeah, and Willie, oh my gosh, I came up with this great idea. Talk to Vladimir Putin. Negotiate with Vladimir Putin. Why didn't anybody think about that before yesterday? Oh, wait, they did. And we've been jabbering on as a country, rightfully so, about offering.
The precursor context that you're missing is Ukrainian refused to do that, so that's why the retaliation happened in late February.
Off-ramps. And while we're talking about off-ramps to help this guy get out of the corner of one of the most criminal and most idiotic decisions that any international leader has made in our lifetimes, well, we're talking about Putin.
Anyone who works in this two-party duopoly has a full-on basket laundry list of idiotic foreign policy decisions with all the wars that we've been in, I mean, Barack Obama himself added 7 extra wars. And the 80 plus countries and counting that some form of sanctions were being placed on. Yeah, you want to make it seem like Vladimir Putin has a comparable red flag list.
Putin's off ramp. Putin is targeting civilians. He's deliberately committing war crimes. He's ordering that his soldiers gun down civilians as they retreat from towns. Talk to Vladimir Putin. We tried that. He doesn't want to talk, Willie.
No, he's not interested in talking. They talk about vigorous diplomatic.
Yeah, no one talks about the captured Vladimir Zelensky and how when he first took office that he was supposedly more open to talking. But over time, as the more and more that the U.S. interest taken over have captured him, the more and more resistant he has become.
Efforts in that letter signed by 30 Democratic progressives without saying exactly what that would look like or how it might persuade Vladimir Putin to get out of Ukraine.
Pretty simple.
More than 2 dozen Democrats.
If you ask me, I'm sure if as long as there's a thing that could happen that most of these corporate propagandists don't believe is possible. That is, as long as the regions that don't like Ukraine anymore and the fact that they've been under siege by their own government for over 8 years, I'm sure if they were just able to be independent territories and cease fire, I'm sure that could be that. But the fact that we don't know that and corporate media wants to push out a narrative that it isn't possible is absolutely absurd. And it's also the thing that leads us to a more dangerous outcome. That's actually going to affect more people, specifically those who live in NATO countries. Now we'll go to this quick little clip from that includes Focana talking about the House Progressive letter. So let's look at that for a moment.
Still backing it. Congressman, what in the world happened here?
Let me tell you my position. I have voted for every package to arm Ukraine. I will continue to vote to arm Ukraine.
But what happened with this? Signed the letter, didn't sign the letter, it was a staffer. How does this happen?
I don't think the staff was to blame. I think the letter is common sense. We're going to stand with Ukraine, but at the same time, we're going to have diplomacy to try to end the war. You know who tweeted out that just today? Ambassador McFaul, who is one of the strongest advocates for standing with Ukraine.
Ooh, so let me get this right. You think that there's actual sense to giving Ukraine everything at once, and somehow that's going to get them to be open to diplomacy? Because there's one country that I'm hearing is far more resistant to it, and it's not Russia. No. And this is the thing that this thing usually plays out. What he's suggesting right there in that clip is what happens to global naive people all the time. They think if you give Democrats your votes, that just eventually means they're going to give you something back in return. But what they don't understand is the fact that you're in an abusive relationship and they don't have to give you anything back when you hand over the only power you have, and that is your vote. And they're playing out that parallel example on a higher level. You think giving Ukraine everything at once, and they're suddenly going to be incentivized to want to go for diplomacy? Hell no, they won't be. More like diplomacy. It's the American way. Like, as in diplomacy Cheney. By the way, fuck this Cheney.
No, people need to look at the history. When we armed the Mujahideen in Afghanistan, did President Reagan stop talking to the Russians? Absolutely not. One of the reasons we got the withdrawal of the Russians is we continued to negotiate. When we had the height of the Cold War, did our senior military stop talking to the Russian military? Absolutely not. These people on Twitter, have they spoken to General Dunford? Because I have. Have they spoken to Admiral Mullen? Have they spoken to the senior military leaders? They have no idea what they're talking about. I'm on the Armed Services Committee. I don't want us to have a nuclear war, and I trust the president's judgment.
Congressman, I'm not arguing any of those points.
So you're not even going to try to withhold the weaponry as a tool of leverage to get them to push for diplomacy?
What I'm asking is, you got 2 weeks to go before the midterms. Do Democrats need these kind of messy, unforced errors right now? Republicans, love them or hate them, even those who privately despise Donald Trump, when they need to get in line and fight Democrats, they all get in line behind him. Do Democrats need to have their eye on the ball right now?
Well, look, the letter that I signed was in July. Do I think that it should have been released now? No, but you know who made an issue of it is all of those folks on Twitter. What they should have done is to have the judgment of people like Ambassador McFaul, who would have said, of course we need to stand with Ukraine. Is there any person in that letter who's saying we're going to stop the funding? No, that's Kevin McCarthy's position. But are you telling me that the Democrats shouldn't be for force and diplomacy? We're a party of responsibility. And by the
way, responsibility, yet they have no interest in taking the responsibility of relieving people from the pain of inflation, for one. They only have interest in cutting $2 trillion from the national debt, which is only something that really feeds the government ego stroke, while it does nothing for the average person to have the national debt cut. So tell me, you've done nothing to responsibly change the lives of people. And you want to talk midterms? People see what's going on right now. We got this whole argument that Twitter isn't real life. Guess who the person not completely disconnected from politics? You think they're going to be more receptive to some shrieking liberal who's always talking about vote, 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 Democrats good, Republicans bad? Or are they going to be more receptive to hearing the viewpoint of someone like me who's diametrically opposed to voting anything within the two-party system, strongly opposed to the way that this whole proxy war is being handled between Russia and Ukraine. And just talk about money. And I know I can get more people to be more towards my position. Then when you talk about disenfranchised people who could be left, and bringing up the funding of Nazis and how liberals have become major hypocrites on that. WCSN. Looks like tax and spend Dems have joined the don't tax but spend warmonger Republicans. Very, very much so, sir.
The way, I have talked to senior leaders at the White House. I have said the president has one of the best judgments on this. And my guess is that the president himself would agree that we need to have this kind of diplomacy.
So let's talk about the next 2 weeks. What do Democrats need to focus on? It's go time.
The economy. Look, we're winning.
No real focus there. If economy was a real focus, the government would be subsidizing pretty much all the food and groceries that exist on the market. You know, that's a way you can fight inflation. We've seen Mexico do it with like gas by being able to relieve it by $1 per gallon. Do I see anything like that playing out here? No.
On reproductive rights as a human right. Oz made a terrible gaffe today that's going to cost it. We're winning on voting rights, but we've got to win the economy, and we've got such a simple case to make. We're bringing manufacturing home. We're actually helping the working class. They're running on Trussonomics. They're literally running on what bankrupted the British. They're saying that they want tax cuts. They're saying they want to cut Social Security. How are we not winning the economic argument when they're running on exactly what Britain did?
It's because they're not doing it. Democrats aren't doing anything to reverse it. They, at best, put the car in park. But they don't actually turn it around and drive it in the other direction.
Make the best point. How are we not winning on the economic argument? You're the ones who have taken us from the depths of the pandemic. Then what is it about messaging and strategy that Republicans seem to win on this when they're not even offering anything?
You know, bluntly, Stephanie, it's the consultant class.
What does that mean?
I'll tell you what. They look at the polling. They say, Democrats, you're up on reproductive rights. You're up on voting rights. Talk about that. Don't talk about the economy. That may be a tough issue for us. Give me a break. I mean, look, I'm for codifying Roe versus Wade as our first vote. Second vote, let's have voting rights. But why not on third, fourth, fifth, sixth vote do the economy? And we need to talk about it and make the choice. You know, one of the things that's a problem is the same thing with Russia. We have no sense of nuance anymore in our politics. There's just the sense of you do one thing and you have to stick to that. We can talk about abortion, voting rights, and the economy. And we need to speak with our hearts as opposed to poll tested messages.
All right, then. Congressman, thank you so much for joining me tonight.
That's not nuance either. That's the theater character coming out at the end. But that's not the worst part about this. We now got to go in on Bernie Sanders because he made himself indistinguishable from the worst of worst warmongering neocons in this article that you're about to see up on the screen. Here it is, an article by Dave Weigel, where it gets a lot of quotes from the Senator Bernie Sanders, who throws those House progressives under the bus in the same way that Pramila Jayapal did. But the thing is, they're not throwing them. They're not just throwing them under the bus and walking away. They're throwing them on the bus, then they're going to lay down behind them and get ran over by that same motherfucking bus. Vermont Senator Bernie Sanders said Tuesday that the Russian invasion of Ukraine has to be resisted, and that the Congressional Progressive Caucus was right to withdraw a letter that urged President Biden to negotiate an end to the war with Vladimir Putin. I don't agree with that, and they don't agree with it apparently, Sanders told Semaphore in a phone interview. It was withdrawn today, so it becomes a non-issue. Sanders, who is launching a multi-state midterm campaigning swing to help senators in tough races, remain committed to supporting Ukraine from a major power invading and causing mass destruction. He dismissed the claim from some candidates and some protesters who have called progressive members of Congress warmongers over the votes to fund Ukraine's counteroffensive. Democrats, warmongers, said Sanders, where you have Putin breaking all kinds of international laws, unleashing an incredibly disgusting and horrific level of destruction against the people of Ukraine. And that right there is the whole derangement Bernie Sanders has. In fact, even going back to both his campaign runs, he displayed some of the highest levels of Trump derangement. And now he was one of the biggest voices of Russia gating. And now he's playing defense for a party where people got their hopes up that he could be a potential revolutionary. When this guy's always been sus as fuck when it comes to his foreign policy takes. He's made bad votes on war. Then he'll eventually make the, oh, I'm sorry, I shouldn't have voted that way. Like the Iraq War. Or the other moment where he pulled that, oh, the 94 crime bill was a major mistake of a vote, and I should have never done that. Among, oh, Bernie, yes, that's right, Kelly. That's examples of, he'll pull out the regret card to make you, to win you back over and try to keep you from not cutting ties with him in the way that so much of the left has after 2 failed campaigns, and him providing no opposition to Joe Biden whatsoever. In fact, he has helped play defense for his good friend Joe as strong as anyone has. In fact, those people who are talking up what Joe Biden has done in nearly 2 years, the most are the elected progressives. They're doing it more than Joe Biden's closer aligned conservative Democrats. And as I said before, when it comes to the spectrum of Democrats, there are hardly any real centrists You could barely even call what we have being labeled as progressives right now centrist. They're all right-wingers. And they're more extreme than normal international right-wing parties. And he's literally the best we've had since 1968. Are you Bernie, so we're in a dim Republican world of shit? That's pretty much it, WCSN. Then Sanders did not want to delve much further into the subject. He was focused on sharpening the Democrats' economic message in media interviews. Because, he can talk a rhetoric game about supposedly wanting to challenge the rich, when in reality we know that those are all facades and lies. In his upcoming tour, but the CPC's letter highlighted divisions on the left that have played out in campaigns around the country. Even as elected Democrats have largely presented a united front on Ukraine, till this week, former Rep. Tulsi Gabbard's departure from the Democratic Party in her media tour, she accused Ukraine of actively pushing us to a brink of nuclear holocaust, have been embraced by Republicans who want to end that funding if the party wins control of that Congress. But as always, they always leave out the part that they only want to shift the war machine. They don't want to truly end it. Just know, Bernie Sanders has no principle when he talks about all these billionaires, whether they're part of Amazon, Walmart, or wherever fucking else, and bringing up the three of the richest people like Elon Musk, Mark Zuckerberg, for example, and Jeff Bezos. But you don't want to talk that talk on challenging the war machine. Bernie Sanders is full of shit and unserious, as he doesn't even have principle on challenging the billionaire class in this country. So that's a reason why there is no real movement to be led by Bernie Sanders. He was a sheep herder that was designed to keep people into this hamster wheel known as the Democratic Party, play the political whack-a-mole, the fruitless endeavor that you're never going to win. And he's never been a good opposition to war. He tried to play the fence when it comes to Israel and Palestine, hence why he gets called a progressive Zionist. There's no then that usually comes in like the two-state solution, and that won't happen. Why don't we just look at representatives and their friends, family, stock holding, sales purchases? I mean, it does happen, but when it does, it's like they try to pull the quit pocket watching on them when it should really be more pocket watching and picking, to be honest. Then you gotta look at this way, another angle of it. Bernie Sanders was not considered pro-black enough throughout these two campaign runs. But when you have like K-Hive liberal accounts trying to push that argument, we know they were full of shit because they were shilling for candidates who are even more anti-black than Bernie Sanders himself. And if you're not anti-war and principled on foreign policy, then you're anti-black and brown all over the world. That's where a flaw in Bernie Sanders was. Yes, WCSN, the only rep that was able to uphold some principle on that front was Mike Revelle. And they, as you saw that debate clip in 2008, they treated him like a fucking crazy man when he tried to call his fellow Democrats war criminals. Even the guy Barack Obama, who pretended to be a progressive for a few months. So Bernie Sanders, while it is fair to call out how he could have been a better anti-racist campaign, because yes, foreign policy is a big chunk of the equation there. But he came up short even here by not being for defunding the police, or while he was technically for only cutting like 5 or 10% of the military budget. The fact is, if you're not at least for 50%, that's the basic standard here. 50% cut. Although, you know, with me, I'm 90% budget cut. And I would even be welcome to more too. So when you want to talk, you got these liberals who talk about being anti-racist and pro-Black Lives Matter, but they don't care about the ones in Africa. If they did, they'd be fucking outraged at the bombing in Somalia and all the sanctions being held and done in those countries. They'd be outraged of the intervention that the United States wants to take over in Haiti. But they got nothing to say for that, do they? Instead, it's, the Ukrainian Nazis are less bad than the ones in Russia. Because Putin's the crazy one. If you have principle on that, you'd be abstaining. And that's just not happening. But we got to go show you a couple more politicians get confronted by the contingency of the Jose Vega crowd, as they just did it to Elizabeth Warren now. So let me put that video up next.
Senator, you have got to stop funding a Nazi-infested Ukrainian regime. You are bringing us to the brink of nuclear war. You have got Those billions could be used for a lot of good things here in the U.S. Instead of funding Nazis in Ukraine, they're preparing a dirty bomb to detonate and blame on Russia.
This is not why we're here.
I am here to make sure that billions of lives are saved
We are going to ask you to leave,
instead of
sir.
getting into a
We are
nuclear
going to
war.
ask you to leave, sir.
You've asked me, I heard you.
Yes.
I will move towards the
Please.
end.
This is not. Yes,
That's
this way,
right.
sir.
No,
This way,
nuclear
sir.
war. Yes, I'm black and brown too.
So
let them get the information. And I don't want.
See, this is the gross part of identity politics being. They had someone try to use it as a justification to shut down a talk of a very serious issue. And the big picture is this potential for nuclear war should be of highest concern. Yet, I imagine that most of this crowd here was the staffer types. So think about this for a moment. I imagine that that they did that in order to try to get him to stop. Because, this neoliberal rainbow war machine will use everyone else to manufacture consent for what they're doing right now with all the funding that is going to Ukraine. And it's like, that is like an implicit message. Oh, there's non-white people okay with funding Ukraine. And they don't care that there's Nazis involved. That's what the shield that they're trying to use.
Them to die in a nuclear war that my tax money is funding.
And that right there is a good way to debunk that in real time. It's like, yeah, I don't want them to die in a nuclear war. Because what they're effectively, the actions that every single Democrat is taking right now is one that can lead to nuclear war. And yes, nuclear weapons do not discriminate between race, age, sex, your living situation. Not at all.
Because the Congress and the Senate are funding Nazis in Ukraine. Do you want a nuclear war? A nuclear war will cancel your debt and your life. I have sent letters.
That right there is the big picture that so many people aren't getting. Sure, you're not going to get student debt canceled. That's the big picture that is not being gotten by people yet. The big picture is you don't get to find out what it's like to live without student debt if nuclear war happens.
I have sent emails, I have made calls to these senators and congressmen. They refuse to respond. We are marching to nuclear war behind fools in political office. They have got to stop it. Nuclear war is the issue. Nuclear.
This is the part where, this we gotta drown this guy out now. We don't like what he's saying. And just another example of when you try to pressure these fucking cowards. They don't want that smoke again. they melt under that pressure. So they got to use diversion tactics like these in order to divert what's happening.
War. Consideration.
None of this matters if there's a nuclear war and we all die. In 2018, there was an eagle.
So if the rich hide out in the bunkers during the nuclear war, who's going to cook and clean for them afterwards? If they're lucky, they may be able to get their families to do it, but there won't no longer be an underclass for them to assist in that, unless they're hiding robots who can do all that shit. But what you could not hear very well was that other guy who was saying that in 2018, the Senate passed a rule stating that they're no longer allowed to fund the Azov Battalion. So from the moment of late February, early March, when Russia retaliated finally, that was when Senate broke their rules and decided to fund the Azov Battalion again. Hey there, Uncle Warren. And yes, you're right. There's a bunch of sexy people that have showed out for this stream so far. But as this is a good little design that this group has had. They not only have one person there to challenge these politicians and try to hold their feet to the fire, they've got a second person ready. But I would argue in moments like these, they should think about having that third and fourth person on hand. And it was also unfortunate that that guy did not project his voice more, because I wish he would have. I mean, I do struggle at times with projecting my voice myself. But in a moment like that, after the first couple words start to come out my mouth, it will get louder. I may have social anxiety at times, but if I'm in a situation that I get to call out a politician for funding Ukrainian Nazis, yeah, I'm going to have that voice volume at least 80%. Kind of like how Frank Analysis, who's considered more on the soft-spoken side, you could hear him elevate his voice when he went to do it last year when they had that little performative camp out for the eviction moratorium.
Cancel student debt! 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 Cancel student debt!
What the sad part is that that's really some regular people in that crowd. Then we've got a lot of fucking work to do to break through to them. Just like with many of the issues that the Democratic Party is taking everyone along and stringing them along for, and dangling like a carrot that you keep chasing and chasing and chasing. But you're never going to catch up to it. And there comes a point where you just have to make them come back to chasing us. And too many people aren't understanding that part right now. I love to see a list of dual citizen reps and how they voted on all this Nazi funding. Well, what we do know is the Democrats are extremely easy because not a single one has voted against any of the packages so far. Republicans, you could probably get slightly more mixed results from a few. Liz laughs when she squirms. So much more to go. We gotta highlight shitlib congregate for a moment.
You make the right point that what Biden's saying is, I won't negotiate around the settlement that Ukraine has to accept without them. That doesn't mean we don't have things to talk to the Russians about. It just means Biden's not going to sit there and say, well, maybe you can keep this part of Ukraine and not that part of Ukraine. That's not going to happen. But to your point, if you don't create any space for kind of debate in the center here around this policy, you know where all the concerns about the war are going to go? They're going to go to where Kevin McCarthy took it, right?
Totally.
Which is like, hey, I'm getting uncomfortable here. There's nuclear threats. Let's cut off the Ukrainians, right?
It's a lot of money.
So, you know, to some of you, like some of the Ukraine stands on Twitter or whatever, who like just, you know, pile on this stuff, you might be creating the outcome you don't want, because by punishing anybody who says, let's have diplomacy, the only alternative to your position, you know, is where Kevin McCarthy's going, which is like, hey, let's cut these, where Tucker Carlson is, basically.
Or where Elon Musk. I mean, there's clearly a void of people.
There's a void of,
and like
discussion.
Elon Musk is filling it, or that guy David Sachs, some like idiot tech investor, right-wing goober is filling it. You know, it's like, why don't we have the CPC, the Congress, the progressive in the House fill it, or at least try?
Well, that would be a very healthy place to.
And that goes to also show you how little of a impact that the independent left media space has, because they talk about people who are, you know, throwing this opposition and pushing for diplomacy. They only mention people who reside on the right, while the people who we consider big on the left, they didn't even register to get a mention here. Hell, they didn't even mention Russell Brand. But some shitlib did have to say that. Especially the part that being the full pile-on fight to the very end types of Ukraine shitlibs and NAFO dogs are pushing for an outcome that they don't want. And that really needs to come to an end.
If you read it, like it's literally just saying that we should be exploring diplomacy with Russia. There's nothing.
It's like a restatement of policy.
There's literally nothing objectionable in the letter whatsoever. And this.
Yeah, there was nothing objectionable because there was nothing to, it was so tepid. Right? Someone like the Pod Save America guys couldn't even have any real objection to it. But the point is, someone had, from their camp, had to call out their side and how this undevoted flow of weapons and aid is absolutely going to get to a point where it can make things worse for us all. Spud Save America is more like it, especially among the things that you'd get to ask AOC and you get into a fried conversation. I mean, if most of us got to interview AOC, I think that we would find that they would be lucky to that she would stick around for 5 minutes. And that once we start to interrogate her on force the vote or criticize her for her stance on Joe Biden, there would be no. She'd be clicking exit from that webcam. And that would be that. Hey, and Nuggets game just started. But there's a lot more Rochford Files to be had still. Just so you know. Yeah, next, I think this is a good... and Skeeter on Twitch. I still haven't gotten quite to the Fetterman and Dr. Oz debate highlights yet. But it'll happen soon. But we got to start off next with this Jeffrey Sachs clip. And the reason why I bring it up... Oh, this... Wrong one. Gray Zone got kicked out from a summit because they're one of the only platforms that are willing to challenge the Ukraine narrative, and that web summit decided to create an echo chamber this time around. Here it is.
Most democratic, the most violent country in the world in the 19th century, by far, was perhaps the most democratic or second most democratic, and that was Britain. You can be democratic at home and ruthlessly imperial abroad. The most violent country in the world since 1950 has been the United States. It's been by far involved
Jeffrey,
in more,
stop
wait a
now.
minute, in more
Let's
wars.
Jeffrey, I'm your moderator, and it's enough.
Okay, I'm done.
So Jeffrey Sachs says the quiet part out loud about the United States being a brutal country. Absolutely brutal. But I want to go back to this point right here.
You can be democratic at home and ruthlessly imperial abroad.
The reason why I want this quote to stay up on the screen for a moment is because of the fact that there's so many people who have this naive belief. Oh, we can just not mess with challenging the foreign policy aspects of it. Let's just try to get Medicare for all. You know, that $15 minimum wage, which should have been a push for way more years ago. And, affordable housing and free college. But the thing I've been trying to tell y'all the whole time, there is no Medicare for all. There are no thriving wages. If you don't challenge the imperialism abroad, not being opposed to war, there is no making that happen. Because you think with the way that they prioritize the military industrial complex, which is, by the way, their first and foremost priority, that you can just ignore that shit and somehow get to the point of better social democracy. And I keep saying that to sock Dems, there's no fucking chance of that happening. And they keep pushing this lie time and time again. The ruthlessly imperial stuff doesn't just happen abroad. It happens here too. And their actions are violence. With every vote that they make, with every shareholder corporation that they are complicit to and they are beholden to, that becomes violence on us. They did it when they decided no go on trying to push for Medicare for all in the height of a pandemic. They did it when they decided that there would be no push for a higher wage. They did it when they said you're to fend for yourselves, that barely $4,000 was enough money for you to survive on if you didn't manage to get unemployment. So there is no being Democrat at home either. They're ruthless. The part that that some people here don't understand is they are ruthless to us in their own way. But they are even more ruthless to the global south, the Middle East in specific. But they think that they can throw people abroad under the bus in order to improve our own conditions. That's not going to happen ever with the way things are going right now. Yes, they are all clowns in the circus. But they think that if they show up in clown costumes themselves and try to fit in, that conditions will suddenly get better. And that's just not the case here. Now we are to a point where we can finally move to like a bit of the debate discourse from last night. I'm just going to go through a few of the more notable moments, but it's not going to be like ad nauseum because I don't want it to be like that. So let's start off with a thread from Glenn Greenwald. Anyone who watched any part of the debate between Fetterman and Oz knows exactly what happened, and whether they're willing to admit or not, people should read this thread and remember what was done to Dasha Burns to immediately see why people hate and distrust the media. Yeah, they're talking about his struggle to talk since his stroke. I've mentioned Vanguard as a show to watch if you want to see two young, intellectually honest, and smart leftists. They love Fetterman, but watch what they had to say as soon as the debate ended. It's at minute 43 and 20 seconds, and it's not hard to be. And I'm just going to say this is the one flaw with this thread. The Vanguard is now turned into bread tube hacks. They're like the diet bread tube these days. They melted down and turned into. They melted down and made a transitional arc once Jimmy Dore did a little pushback on them. I mean, I could have also subjected y'all to some highlights of the discussion they had with Kyle Kulinski on Ukraine and Russia, where they completely ignore any of the framework that paints Ukraine as looking bad. Meanwhile, this is the discourse part of the ableism, which is in a way taking away the focus from like the foreign policy, like the actual issues at hand here. Let's just listen to this for a moment.
You could tell. I wrote one of the things you posit in your article is that Fetterman's campaign is hoping to turn his sort of vulnerability into an asset here. Do you think he did so on the debate stage tonight?
I think it's tough to say whether or not it will wind up being an asset with voters, but it was certainly an example of such remarkable transparency, the opposite of what the Oz campaign has sort of asserted, which is that he's somehow hiding something about his health. I mean, showing up for an hour debate, and it was, as he said, starting out, he said he was going to talk about the elephant in the room. You played the clip. He said, I'm going to miss words. And you could tell, I wrote in my story about how in my interview with him, there was a moment where he became frustrated and stressed out, and it made some of his communicative problems worse. And I think that this context and what you described as the insanely high stakes of this election, this single debate, clearly this was a candidate who was feeling stress, and there was such intense scrutiny, often ableist scrutiny, on how he was going to communicate. And he just did a debate in front of, the nation, an audience of anyone who could listen. And it was so transparent. He did fumble. He did make verbal mistakes, and it was all on view.
All right, so here's the thing. The discourse that is an issue to me is this is becoming aesthetics, in my opinion. When you just focus it on the ability of John Fetterman to communicate and function, when we've got dinosaurs like Nancy Pelosi, Dianne Feinstein, Mitch McConnell, and a few other near 90-year-olds in Congress. That's the problem right there, is it turns into an argument of aesthetics, kind of like how the baseline one of if we just get rid of old people, things will suddenly get better. That's where, if your politics are only based in aesthetics, you're going to realize you should be realizing pretty quickly that they could change the faces to appease you, and you're still going to get the same shitty policy. See, Kelly, Fetterman is pro-fracking. Oz wants local politicians involved in abortion. Choose your douche or turd sandwich. Slight spoilers of the clips coming up, Kelly. I am pro-fracking, I'm for fracking, and we need more fracking. I'm for fracking. So clearly stated, want to vote for more fascism. Yes, he was flustered when, in that interview, they brought up the interview that Fetterman did with Savage Joy back in 2018. Hey, go start. Good to see you're here. Doesn't matter if you scratch the red ball or blue ball under a one dick politic. D's nuts 2024. So let's shift to a notable clip from each of the candidates. There's a clip I want to focus on from Fetterman in specific. From the perspective of Fetterman, which is this one that I'm about to put up.
Turning now to foreign policy. Mr. Fetterman, what do you believe is the greatest foreign threat to the United States of America? You have 60 seconds.
I believe, is right now is China. I believe China is not our friend. And I believe that we can't be able to push back, and we need to stand against China. And I believe that Dr. Oz has chosen to manufacture all of his merchandise on his name on it in China. Which one of us on this stage is going to stand up?
So, got a result to the xenophobia, Mr. Fetterman? Got to out Chinaphobe the Republicans, I suppose, right? And the fact that he tries to bring up the hypocrisy of Republicans in China, because we know they're profiting from the China market too, but they want to pretend like only Democrats are. But it falls flat when you're pushing the same antagonistic tropes
Against and stand firm against China, and I believe that's our single biggest issue right now, to make sure that we address China and make sure that we know that it's not our friend.
Turning now to foreign.
So the answer is to become a bald-headed Trump when you have to speak on China. Is that really it, Mr. John Fetterman? Yes, you got the spelling right on that one, Mariella. And that's the stuff that really matters. All this empty noise about him talking about healthcare or wages, which we know that so-called progressives going into Congress, but now are acting like full-on neocons. That's not going to mean much to someone who prioritizes the foreign policy aspect of their politics. Because we know that they're going to vote for every war that they're asked to. We know that Fetterman is an extremely pro-Israel progressive. He stated his outward support of Ukraine. So that's effectively no different than anything you see from an average establishment politician. That's right there, Kelly, is when we know we have a serious politician on that platform. When they're calling our own politicians the greatest threat. But until that happens, and until they get that stage, we are a long, long way from that moment. And the thing about that is, this is why you can believe the ableist narratives, but the reality is, it's part of the reason why Fetterman isn't running away with this is in part because of, for one, the party he's running under and the big issues of his platform. And I think the fact that enough people have wised up to know that what's not going to happen is them following through on promises. But we'll get to the big Dr. Oz clip next. Here it is.
You say that you're pro-life, but you do support abortion exceptions in the cases of rape, incest, and to protect the life of the mother. Aside from those three exceptions, should abortion be banned in America? 60 seconds.
There should not be involvement from the federal government in how states decide their abortion decisions. As a physician, I've been in the room when there's some difficult conversations happening. I don't want the federal government involved with that at all. I want women, doctors, local political leaders, letting the democracy that's always allowed our nation to thrive, to put the best ideas forward so states can decide for themselves.
You say that you're pro-life.
You know, back in 2006, that would have been a death blow to Dr. Oz's campaign right there. 2008. But now that we've seen a supermajority in Congress fuck around and not do shit under Obama, this is not going to be the needle mover that some of these liberals are trying to talk it up to be. People have wised up. They know that they're trying to, that if these midterms are successful at all for the Democrats, that this effort is going to be sucked up into a land of inaction if they somehow survive the midterms and make that fictitious goal of gaining the 2 extra senators that Joe Biden says that's all they need, then that means that that's going to be another moment where Democrats prove to everyone that they are deeply unserious about following through on any promises, and anything that they tie their campaign platform on in that very moment is just used to grift the last few dollars that you have, which would be better be used for mutual aid and probably for groceries that, compared to some money-hungry politicians robbing you in the process. And you've got hacks like David Sirota who are just focusing on like aesthetics when it comes to this race, when it should really be two shit candidates just like any others, except these have been more celebritized and elevated like a main event feud at a pay-per-view. Oh, yep, I could tell. But Ghost Star, is your name that because of the energy drink? But yeah, it's definitely the biggest theater of any of these races that we've seen outside of the Herschel Walker and Raphael Warnock. And the thing is, being able to see through this political theater and finding out that both these candidates are fucking trash, and that's anywhere D versus R, period. And I don't have the showtime or the capacity to go through these debates ad nauseum like some people do. But just want to point out that, or quote unquote so-called progressive John Fetterman is going to have effectively the same foreign policy as the celebrity Dr. Oz. And that John Fetterman is supposedly one of the two possible senators who could help for Roe versus Wade, but it's just going to end up being that. Where after the new Congress takes office in January, you're going to see things remain the same. So I'd like to thank you all for coming out to tonight's episode of the Rochford Files with your host, Andrew Rochford. If you haven't liked the stream yet, please do. If you're someone new, please click the subscribe button. Share the stream to familiar, unfamiliar, and new places in order to help this channel grow. Shout out to Uncle Warren. I know he often mentions me, especially on the midnight streams. For example, and it'll come with time. Also, go to the link tree below. Follow me on other platforms like Twitch and Rumble. And yes, thanks so much, WCSN. You've been one of the loyal ones here, along with Kelly, the two most loyal ones to the channel. Yes, good vibes. Go start. And let's see. Thanks so much, Uncle Warren. I know there won't be a show Friday night. I know that much for sure. I think it's either possible. I think the next show will either be like a late Saturday afternoon or a Sunday night. more likely Sunday night, is when I plan to be back. But this is the point of the show where I say, take this shit off the internet and bump it outside. This is Andrew Rochford saying goodbye and good night. Yes, go join Uncle Warren Friday night. Much love to Kelly, Ghost Start, WCSN, Mariella, Ellie, and anyone else who watched in the background tonight.